What's up YouTube, Kainu back here again for another video. Today we're checking out how is rugby different from American football. Without further ado, get into it.
In the late
Here we go.
1880s, the sport of rugby was beginning to spread across college campuses in the United States. The game was hugely popular, but not with everyone. Yale player Walter Camp was particularly critical of the lack of tactics involved in the chaotic and inconsistent scrum. And at the 1880 Intercollegiate Rugby Convention, he proposed an innovation: the scrimmage. This marked the beginnings of a codified separation between the American sport of football and the English sport of rugby, and the two games have followed very different paths since then. But how different are they today? Rugby and American football have pretty similar aims: to get the ball into your opponent's end zone. In rugby, the ball has to be grounded to score a try, while in football, just running into the end zone is enough for a touchdown. A try is worth 5 points, where a touchdown is worth 6, but in rugby, after scoring a try, if a team can then kick the ball between the goalposts from any place in line with where the try was grounded, then they can add 2 points in what's known as a conversion. Points can also be scored in rugby if a team decides to kick a penalty between the posts, which is worth 3 points. Penalties are awarded for fouls and are similar to field goals, but must be taken from where the foul was committed, meaning that kickers often attempt to score points at an angle, rather than kick straight at the goalposts. A team can also...
I'm going to be honest, I think this might be the best rugby video for the rules that I've ever watched. It's actually making sense to me, my small American pea brain.
So kick the ball between the posts in open play for 3 points in what's known as a drop goal, but these are relatively rare. Now, it's probably important here to specify that when we say rugby, we're really talking about Rugby Union, the most popular code of the sport. There's also Rugby League, a different code with different rules, and fans who would be justified in their annoyance at this video describing Rugby Union as just rugby. But for the sake of simplicity, we continue. Rugby Union has 15 players on a team. American football
15.
has 11. But where it has separate defensive and offensive teams for different game situations, all 15 rugby players remain on the pitch or field regardless of whether they're defending or attacking, on offense or defense. There are no special teams in rugby either, with a designated player who's on the pitch at all times responsible for kicking dead balls. Rugby teams can be reduced to 14 men temporarily if one of their players is given a yellow card by the referee for a serious foul or indiscipline. This will result in said player being sent to the sin bin, where they're made to sit out of the match for 10 minutes before returning to the game. A player can be thrown out of a match permanently if they receive a red card, which is essentially the same thing as being ejected from the game. And the playing time of a rugby match is also longer, with 2 40-minute halves as opposed to 4 15-minute quarters. Rugby pitches are also shorter but wider and have H-shaped goalposts situated on the try line instead of the Y-shaped posts that are found at the end of the line of a football pitch. A rugby ball is also slightly wider than a football, although both are roughly the same length. Where it's different though is that rugby players don't wear helmets, although some players may choose to wear a scrum cap in order to avoid cuts, tears, and what's known as cauliflower ears. Mouth guards are optional too, but it's very rare that you'll see a player without one. Now, gaining territory is crucial in both sports, but the way that you do this differs massively. The first and arguably most important difference between the two sports is that in rugby, passes made with the hand must go backwards. This is why players who aren't in possession will be situated behind the ball carrier, with anyone in front of them considered offside. If the player receiving the pass drops the ball forwards, then this is considered a knock-on, and the punishment for that is a scrum. A scrum is where the 8 forwards for each team, who tend to be the bigger, stockier players, line up against each other in a 3-4-1 formation. The ball is thrown into the tunnel between the 2 front rows by the team who've been awarded the scrum, at which point the 2 hookers can compete for the ball with their feet and kick it back in the direction of their teammates. The team who throws the ball into the scrum usually retains possession within the scrum because the scrum half, the player who throws the ball into the scrum, and the hooker, the player who competes for it with their feet, can usually synchronize their actions. And the advantage of this scrum is that there will then be more space for the faster backs to gain ground, while all the forwards are concentrated in one area. Scrums are also awarded if a player has played a forward pass, meaning that players have to pass the ball backwards and then run the ball forwards to gain territory. The only type of forward pass allowed is when a player kicks the ball up the pitch for a teammate to run onto. This obviously has a higher risk of losing possession, but a higher chance of gaining crucial territory. And this is all fundamentally, of course, different to football, where a quarterback can throw the ball forwards to gain that territory. Football teams also have to gain 10 yards within a cycle of 4 attempts, but in rugby there is no requirement for how much territory you have to gain with each play and no limit to how many times players can be grounded within a cycle of possession. And only the player in possession of the ball can be tackled, meaning that blocking is not allowed. A tackle occurs when the ball carrier is brought to the ground. At this point, the ball carrier must release the ball immediately once they've been tackled, and the tackler must release the ball carrier before both players roll away to allow other players to contest for the ball. If the ball is on the ground, then a ruck is formed, where players can't handle the ball but must instead use their feet to move the ball back to their teammates or drive over so that the static ball emerges at the team's hindmost foot where it can then be picked up. Alternatively, if a player is able to stay on his feet when being tackled and is backed up by one of his teammates, then a maul is formed. The team in possession of the ball can attempt to gain territory by driving their opponents back towards the opponent's try line. Mauls will often occur after lineouts, which happens when a ball goes off the side of the pitch. A selection of forwards will line up perpendicular to the touchline, 1 metre apart, before the hooker throws the ball in between them to try and catch. In order to receive particularly high throws, players can be helped into the air by their teammates, but must be supported until they return to the ground for safety purposes. In open play, lineouts are given to opponents of the team who kicked the ball out of play. If they receive a penalty though, teams have the option to kick for touch further up the field, meaning they will retain possession and get to throw the lineouts. And teams will often do this if they feel they can get the ball closer to the goal line to increase the chance of scoring a try. And here there is no equivalent in football.
Like I was saying before, man, I think that's probably the best rugby video I've ever watched. It just, it was very good at like lining up American football with rugby. And I don't think when I watch the other rugby videos, I really understand like the rules per se, because they're just moving so quick. But when you compare it to something that me personally, I have been playing or I have been watching my whole entire life, it just makes so much more sense to me.